Chosen one, something has already been decided about your name. Not 3 days from now, not after another test you did not ask for. Something was decided within the last 30 days, in a moment you did not recognize as significant, in a choice you made when no one was watching, in a prayer you sent upward that felt like it dissolved before it reached the ceiling. But it did not dissolve. It landed. And what was set in motion by that prayer, by that quiet choice, by that night where you decided once more to keep going even though the math of your situation did not support it, is about to become visible before this month closes. And right now, as these words reach you, if you pay attention to the place just beneath your sternum, you will notice something. It is not fear. It is not anxiety, exactly. It is something older than both of those. It is the feeling of a door that is about to open, felt from the inside. The feeling of a letter arriving that has your name on it before anyone has placed it in your hands. Your body already knows what your mind is still trying to verify. You are not here by accident. You were led here by the same intelligence that orders the steps of every chosen one before the moment of their receiving. And that intelligence has been working on something specific in your life, something you have been waiting on longer than you have had the courage to tell anyone. Before this month ends, there is one thing God needs you to receive. Not earn, not achieve, not finally become worthy enough to hold. Receive. And by the time these words are done, you will understand exactly what that thing is and exactly what has been standing between you and it. You have been waiting for something, and not in a passive way, not in the way of someone who simply forgot to act. You have been waiting in the way that costs something. You have held on to a promise long past the point where holding on made sense to the people around you. You have answered the question of when with silence, because you did not have an answer, only a knowing that did not yet have words. Some of you have been in this particular waiting season for months, some for years, and the waiting has not been empty. You have grown inside of it. You have been shaped and refined and made more precise inside of it. But it has also been heavy. There have been mornings where the faith required just to rise felt heavier than you had the strength to carry alone. And here is what almost no one tells you about that kind of waiting. It does not mean the promise was wrong. It does not mean you misheard the original word. It does not mean the door closed while you were not paying attention. In the language of divine timing, a long wait and a sure arrival are not contradictions. They are the same sentence read from two different places in the story. And you are at the place in the story where the sentence is about to complete itself. But there is something specific this month is bringing for you, and the word God needs you to understand before it arrives is receive. Not strive, not earn, not work harder than you already have, not finally become the version of yourself that deserves what was promised. Receive. And that distinction between striving and receiving is the entire shift this message is here to make in you today. There are things that have been happening around you that carry the fingerprints of preparation, signs that are not coincidences, though the mind trained by long disappointment will want to label them that. You know them when they arrive because they feel less like events and more like confirmations of something you already knew but did not have permission to fully believe yet. The first sign is this: you have been waking at unusual hours without knowing why, not in distress exactly, but in a kind of quiet alertness, as if some part of you that does not sleep was trying to get your attention about something it had already seen. That kind of waking is not insomnia. It is the nervous system responding to a shift that the conscious mind has not fully caught up with yet. God uses the still hours to speak into the places that noise and activity keep covered during daylight. The second sign is that you have been noticing an unusual clarity about what no longer fits in your life. Not just opinions or preferences, but certain people, certain patterns, certain environments that used to feel normal. There is something in you that has become quietly intolerant of what used to feel comfortable. You left a conversation and could not fully explain why it drained you. You stood in a familiar place and felt like a visitor. That is not depression. That is not detachment. That is a calibration happening in you. You are being tuned to a new frequency so that what is coming can recognize you. The third sign is that you have had moments, brief and easily dismissed, where something about your future felt completely clear, not planned, not figured out by your own reasoning, just clear in a way that bypassed your understanding entirely, like fog lifting from a landscape you have been driving through for a long time. You could not hold that clarity for more than a few seconds before the familiar mind moved in to qualify it and reduce it back to mere wishing. But the moment of clarity was real. And it was not your imagination manufacturing what you desperately wanted to see. There is a fourth sign that many of you have been afraid to name. You have been letting things go, not all at once, not dramatically, but in quiet increments, things you used to grip tightly because they felt like they were keeping you stable. Relationships that have slowly altered in nature. Versions of the story you had been telling about yourself and your life that have lost their power to fully convince you anymore. There has been a slow loosening happening at a level beneath your conscious decision-making, and it has sometimes felt like loss, before it revealed itself to be the necessary preparation for something your hands are about to hold. A fifth sign: you are here, right now, listening to this at this specific time in this specific month, and I want you to sit for a moment with what that means at a level deeper than the logistics of how you found this message. The chosen one does not stumble into their moments of revelation by accident. They are drawn to them by something older than preference or curiosity. Something that is already in motion on their behalf moves them toward the word they need before they have fully articulated the need. Type 777 inches, the comments, right now, if even one of those signs felt like something you have been living. Let that number be your quiet agreement with what you are beginning to receive. What you are walking through right now is not a pause in your story. It is not God forgetting, not the universe recalculating, not a sign that the original promise was misheard or miscalibrated. It is an interior architecture phase. The shape of what is being built in you during this season is more complex than what you can see from the outside looking in. And most chosen ones reach this threshold and interpret the interior work as evidence that nothing is moving externally, but the two are not disconnected. The depth of the internal formation is always proportional to the scale of the external assignment that is waiting on the other side of it. The chosen one in formation is not someone who sits still while time passes. They are someone who keeps acting from their truest knowing, even when the environment around them has not yet confirmed that knowing is correct. They tithe toward the promise before the provision is visible. They speak identity declarations into empty rooms. They make decisions aligned with who they are called to become, rather than who they currently appear to be. And the accumulated weight of those faithful, invisible actions is what shifts the architecture of the unseen in ways that eventually produce visible change. This is what you have been doing in this season, even when you could not see it clearly. And this is why what is coming is not arriving late. It is arriving precisely on time, in the exact configuration that requires everything you have been built through the waiting to be able to hold it. There is a question I want you to carry into the next part of what I am about to share, and it is this. What if the difficulty you have had fully receiving what God promised has less to do with your faith and more to do with something that happened to your mind long before you had language to describe it? Just hold that question. The answer is coming. There is a woman whose story carries the exact pattern of the moment you are standing in right now. Her name is Mary. And Before you move past this because you think you already know what I'm going to say, let me come at this from an angle that most messages about her never reach. Mary was not asked to perform a miracle. She was asked to receive one. The announcement that came to her did not require that she had done everything right beforehand. It did not require that she had reached a certain level of spiritual maturity. It did not require that she had already figured out what the next step would look like, or that she had the capacity to understand the mechanism of what was being promised. The announcement came before she understood it. It came before she felt ready. It came before she had any reasonable framework for containing what was being placed in her life. And her first response was not a declaration, it was a question. How can this be? And here is what I need you to hear in that question. She was not asking in doubt. She was not pushing the announcement away. She was asking because a human mind, even a deeply faithful one, needs a bridge between what it has always known and what it is being asked to receive for the first time. She was being honest about the gap between what she knew how to hold and what was being handed to her. What was spoken to her in that space between the announcement and her response is the architecture of every chosen. One moment of receiving. Nothing is impossible with God. Not because of your worthiness, not because of your spiritual achievement, not because of how long you have been faithful or how perfectly you have held the waiting, but because the one doing the giving does not require your capacity to understand the mechanism of the miracle. He only requires your willingness to open your hands. Chosen one, you are in a Mary moment, not because you have everything figured out, not because you have finally earned it, but because the announcement is coming. And the thing God needs you to receive before this month closes is already in motion. Your presence here, in this moment, listening to these words, is your yes. That is all the yes that is needed right now. There is a practical thing I want to give you before we go deeper. Something you can begin using today. Because one of the greatest obstacles to receiving in a season like this is not a lack of faith or a weakness of character. It is a difficulty distinguishing between the voice of divine direction and the voice of fear wearing the language of wisdom. They can sound similar. Both carry weight. Both present themselves as truth. Both speak with a kind of authority that feels reliable. But they are pulling you in completely opposite directions. And the way you tell them apart is not by analyzing which one is louder or more persistent. It is by examining where each one leads you. Here is the test. When a thought or direction arises, ask yourself one question. Does following this lead me further into myself or further into what I am being called to become? Fear, even when it speaks with perfect logic and presents compelling evidence, always leads inward. It circles, it reviews, it rehearses past failures as evidence for present caution. It is very good at building a case, but every case it builds has the same conclusion. Stay where you are, stay small. Stay in the territory you have already verified is safe. The voice of divine direction moves differently. It opens, even when what it is asking is frightening, even when it costs something you were not planning to give, there is a quality of expansion underneath it. It calls you toward something. It does not argue endlessly. It does not repeat itself hundreds of times trying to convince you. It speaks clearly once, sometimes twice, and then it waits. And the quality of that waiting feels different from the silence of unanswered prayers. It feels like an invitation that is still open. Begin practicing this distinction in the small decisions of your days. What voice am I hearing right now in this choice? What direction does it actually lead me toward? And notice what happens when you choose to follow the one that opens rather than the one that circles. You do not have to do this perfectly. The practice is not perfection. The practice is simply the willingness to pay attention at a level most people never attempt. Let me pause here for just a moment. not because there is nothing more to say, but because what you have been taking in carries weight. It lands in the body in a particular way. Take one real breath right now, slowly, not as a technique and not as a spiritual exercise. Just as a person who has been carrying something for a long time and who deserves one moment of simply breathing, there is nothing to perform in this breath, nothing to prove in it, just the honest fact of being a human being who has been walking a road that has asked a great deal and who is still, somehow, here. Stay with me, because what comes next is what this month is really about. The season that is breaking open for those who have been faithful in the hidden place does not arrive all at once. It arrives the way light comes in the morning, first at the edges, barely visible, and come, then widening, until there is no more question about whether it is coming, then undeniable, impossible to argue with, filling every corner of the space it enters. There are things coming into alignment for you right now, through channels you did not arrange and cannot fully take credit for. Connections that have been in transit toward you for longer than you know. Resources that have been rerouted in your direction through circumstances that looked, from the outside, like detours or even setbacks. Answers that have been forming in the unseen while you were managing the weight of the scene. For some of you, this will arrive through an unexpected conversation, one that opens a door you had genuinely stopped believing still existed in your life. For others, it will arrive through a sudden and unexplained shift in a situation that has been so still for so long that you had begun to build your identity around its stillness. For others, it will come quietly, in the discovery one morning that the thing you have been afraid of for years has somehow lost its power over you, not because you finally fought it successfully, but because something in you changed while you were sleeping. What is common to every one of these arrivals is this: they come to people who stayed, who did not abandon the vision, even when holding it made them look foolish to people who needed evidence before believing, who continued to act from the knowing even when the knowing had nothing external to point to as proof, who kept their hands open even on the days it felt like nothing was ever going to land in them. Gently press the like on this message if something you just heard landed in a real place. Let that be your agreement with what is being spoken over your life. Type "I receive" in the comments right now. Let those 2 words be your declaration before the rest of what needs to reach you can fully arrive. There is something about the nature of receiving that I have not told you yet, and it is the part of this message that carries the most weight for the chosen ones who have struggled the longest and waited the most faithfully. It is not a brand new revelation, but it arrives differently when it comes to someone who has been through what you have been through. And I want to make sure you hear it before we reach the closing of this message, because it changes something. Not just about this month, but about every season that follows it. The obstacle I want to name is one that almost never gets named directly in messages like this, because it masquerades as something virtuous. It looks like discernment from the outside. It sounds like wise stewardship. It presents itself as the reasonable caution of someone who has been hurt before and learned from it. It is the pattern of needing to fully understand the mechanism of a blessing before you will allow yourself to receive it. You have done this. You have had a door open even slightly, and instead of walking through it, you stood in the doorway, examining the hinges. You have had an opportunity arrive and spent so long analyzing whether it was real, whether it was safe, whether you were misreading something, that by the time you concluded it probably was what it appeared to be, the window had already moved on without you. You have heard a word, a sense, a quiet feeling that had the texture of God, and then you ran it through a verification process so thorough that by the end of the process, you had rationalized your way back into uncertainty. This is not a character flaw. This is a trained response. It was taught to you by a world that gave you enough false hope to make hope feel dangerous, by seasons that looked like beginnings and gradually revealed themselves to be something else. By people who made promises and then slowly, or suddenly, withdrew what they had offered. Your doubt is not stupidity. Your caution is not faithlessness. It is the scar tissue of a heart that learned to protect itself by arriving late to every invitation, so that if the invitation turned out to be a mistake, at least the fall would be shorter. But here is what scar tissue cannot tell you. It cannot tell you whether this particular door is the same as the last one. It reads every new situation through the template of the worst one it has experienced. It identifies threat in spaces where no threat exists, because the cost of being wrong about safety is one it has paid before and does not intend to pay again. And the chosen one, who operates primarily from that kind of scar tissue, will miss the very thing God has spent years preparing them to receive, not because they do not have faith, but because the faith they carry is being filtered through a protection mechanism that was never meant to be permanent. The work of this season is not to silence the doubt. It is to receive in spite of it, to open your hands even while a part of you is still reviewing the risk, to walk through the door before you have personally verified every detail about what waits on the other side. That is not recklessness. That is the precise kind of trust that God responds to. That is the kind of faith that moves something in the unseen. There is another layer to this pattern that deserves direct naming. The chosen one in this season often carries what could be called a reception block, a specific form of inner resistance that is most active precisely at the moment when what was promised begins to arrive. The block does not announce itself as doubt. It wears more sophisticated clothing than that. It arrives as the need to be more prepared, as the conviction that something still needs to be different in you before you are truly ready, as the feeling that the blessing, real as it is, must surely be for a version of yourself that is slightly more complete than the one you are right now. This is the final wall, not because it is the most formidable, but because it appears the latest in the process, and because the chosen one who has made it this far tends to trust it most. They have already overcome much. They have already demonstrated that they can endure. And so when this final quiet voice says not quite yet, they receive it with a gravity they did not give to the early doubts. But this voice is not wisdom. It is the last effort of old patterns to maintain their ground before the new thing replaces them entirely. Type Amen in the comments if you are willing to try this, even once, even today. Before I go further into what this month is actually holding for you, I want to step back and speak plainly. Because I believe that clarity is a form of love, and that you deserve to understand what has been happening before you are asked to respond to it. What you have been experiencing over the last 30 days, the unusual alertness in the night hours, the heightened clarity about what no longer fits, the things falling away that you did not consciously decide to release, the feeling that something enormous is approaching in a way you cannot yet fully define, these are not manufactured experiences. They are not wishful thinking dressed up as spiritual sensitivity. They are the indicators of a real interior transition happening simultaneously at the level of your spirit and at the level of your mind. The spiritual dimension of what is happening is what we have been tracing throughout this message. The preparation, the calibration, the identity shift, the receiving of what God has been holding in trust for you. That is the why behind everything you have been feeling. But there is something happening at the level of the mind itself that science has been quietly documenting for 40 years. Something specific about why some people, even deeply faithful people with genuine belief, have difficulty fully receiving breakthrough when it arrives, and why others who seem to have identical faith appear to access what they believe with what looks like ease from the outside. What the research reveals is not about effort or about spiritual worthiness. It is about a particular state of the mind that either allows reception or creates resistance to it, and there is a way to address it. Earlier, I asked you to hold a question. What if the difficulty you have had fully receiving what God promised has less to do with your faith and more to do with something that happened to your mind before you had language to describe it? That question was not rhetorical. Here is what I mean by it. You were not born with a mind that resisted good things. At the age of 6 or 7 or 8, before the accumulated patterns of the world had time to layer over your original design, your mind was operating in a state that most adults have completely lost access to. You learned with a kind of ease that felt effortless and natural. You saw connections between things that other people could not see. Your reception of new information had no filter that rejected ideas before they could fully land. Your capacity to receive was unlimited. What happened to that mind is not a mystery anymore. The research has been building for 4 decades, and it consistently points to one specific thing. The 2 hemispheres of your brain, which function best in a state of synchronized connection, have gradually become disconnected over time as a result of the chronic stress patterns, the constant processing demands, and the suppression mechanisms of modern adult life. And when that connection weakens, even partially, what suffers first is not your intelligence. What suffers first is your capacity to receive. A woman who found this research grew up in a city in the northeastern United States. Her family held a belief that had been passed down through 3 generations, the belief that they were born under the wrong star. That misfortune was encoded somehow in the family line. Her father had given 22 years of loyalty to a company he loved. He was finally, after all of that time, promoted, and the following month, the company shut its doors permanently. She carried that inherited narrative of bad fortune without seriously questioning it, because the evidence for it seemed to accumulate in ways she could not argue with. Until she found the research I am about to describe. She used what came from that research for 8 weeks. In the 3rd week, her thinking began to shift in a way she could not fully explain to the people around her. Clarity arrived in conversations where she had previously felt foggy. Decisions that had been difficult became obvious. By the end of 2 months, she had received a promotion through a sequence of events she had not engineered or strategized. Her marriage, which had grown into what she described as 2 people sharing a kitchen without truly sharing a life, was quietly and unexpectedly restored. And she said something that stayed with me when she spoke about it. She said the family curse is gone. Not because she fought it, not because she performed any ritual against it, but because something in her mind unlocked and the old pattern simply had no more ground to stand on. That is what happens when hemisphere reconnection occurs in a life that is already oriented toward calling and purpose. It does not override faith. It removes the neural obstruction that was quietly preventing what faith reaches for from fully landing. The research behind this begins with a Nobel Prize. In 1981, Dr. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize in Medicine for a body of work he devoted decades of his life to. His discovery was this: the 2 hemispheres of the human brain, the left and the right, are not simply processing the same information in different stylistic ways. When they are synchronized with each other, something occurs that neither hemisphere can produce alone, a state that researchers would eventually begin calling whole brain activation. In this state, creativity, clarity, pattern recognition, and the capacity to receive new information all rise simultaneously. It is the state that the most generative creators and thinkers throughout history seem to access naturally and regularly. Nikola Tesla described solving problems of extraordinary complexity while in a state he could only compare to a waking dream. Steve Jobs spoke of arriving at insight through a process that looked from the outside like stillness. They were not doing nothing. They were operating with both hemispheres fully synchronized. They were in whole brain activation. 98% of children test at the level researchers categorize as creative genius. By the time those same children become adults, less than 1 in 1,000 still measure at that level. That is not a story about intelligence declining with age. It is a story about a connection being lost, a switch being gradually turned down, and the research shows it can be turned back on. If you have tried sound-based tools or brainwave tracks before and found them incomplete or ineffective, I want to speak to that directly before going further. What Dr. Barone and his team found after years of research is that most such tools address brainwave patterns specifically. But brainwaves are only one part of the picture. The missing element, the one those tools do not address, is the synchronization of the hemispheres themselves. Whole brain activation is an entirely different mechanism from brainwave entrainment. And it is the mechanism that 40 years of research consistently points to as the one that matters most. A team of neuroscientists, led by Dr. Daniel Barone, a neurologist based in New York, spent years translating the foundational research of Dr. Sperry and 4 decades of related neuroscience into something that a person can access at home without clinical equipment or professional supervision. They took what requires a full hour of clinical neural synchronization technology in a lab setting and reduced it to an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. They call it the Genius Switch. It is not a brainwave track. It is not a meditation application. It is not a $7,000 machine. It is a precisely calibrated auditory sequence designed to reconnect both hemispheres of the brain. The same mechanism of whole brain activation that Dr. Roger Sperry won the Nobel Prize describing 8 minutes, headphones on, eyes closed. That is the full protocol. The colleagues who first reviewed this work told Dr. Barone it would represent incredible value even at $500. Consider the alternative: in-person neurofeedback sessions with a specialist run at $300 per hour. An in-home neurofeedback machine begins at $7,000. The Genius Switch is neither of those things in terms of cost or complexity or equipment required. He did not price it at $500. He did not price it at $200. He released it at $49, over 40% below what even those closest to his research said it was worth. And for those who have stayed with this full message today, the price currently available on his page is $39. For $39, you receive the Genius Switch itself, along with 4 free bonuses. A guided visualization developed by a top-rated creator on one of the most recognized wellness platforms, designed to help you see your life unfolding in the 4 areas of money, love, health, and happiness. A grocery guide identifying which common foods available in ordinary American stores are contributing to the brain fog you have been quietly managing. A classic text on abundance thinking that is over 100 years old and forms the foundational root of most modern approaches to manifestation and prosperity, available on its own for $20. And a printable habits infographic you can place where you will see it daily. Every dollar of it is backed by an ironclad 100% money-back guarantee. Listen 8 minutes. Listen 80 times. If it does not work for you, the guarantee returns everything you paid. One thing you should know before searching for this anywhere on your own: if you search on streaming platforms for tracks using similar language, you will find results. Dr. Barone and his team studied those tracks extensively. Most of them had no neural synchronization technology embedded in them at all. They were labeled that way because the label performs well in search and generates attention and advertising revenue. The actual auditory sequence, the one built on the Sperry research and developed through years of clinical work, is only available through the team led by Dr. Barone directly. There is a specific reason for that. and he explains it in full on the page itself. If you want to experience what 8 minutes a day for 2 weeks actually does, in a mind and a life oriented toward calling and purpose, the link in the description and the pinned comment points to exactly where his team made it available. No special equipment, no pills, no schedules to maintain perfectly, just headphones, eyes closed, and 8 minutes of your day. Only investigate this if your spirit confirms it. I am not here to tell you this is for everyone without question. I am here to tell you that for those who have been in this particular season, those who have been waiting faithfully to receive what was promised, what Dr. Barone found may be one of the most practical expressions of provision this moment in your life has produced. There is something that needs to be spoken over you before this message reaches its closing, because receiving what God has prepared for this season is not only about removing obstructions from the path, it is about knowing who you are clearly enough that when the blessing arrives, when the door opens, when the thing you have been waiting for is finally placed in your hands, you do not automatically redirect it, deflect it, or hand it back because some part of you is still uncertain whether it was truly meant for you. You are the hope restorer, the one who has kept a candle burning in spaces where every reasonable person around you has concluded that the darkness was permanent. You have done this not because it was easy and not because you had guaranteed reasons for it. You have done it because something in you could not fully accept the finality of darkness as the conclusion. That is not optimism as a personality trait. That is a calling. And it has been active in you far longer than you have been aware of it. You are the voice, the one who finds language for what those around you are carrying but cannot articulate on their own. You have spoken things into existence for other people while standing in confusion about the direction of your own life. That is not irony. That is not a sign of something broken in you. That is the nature of the chosen one in formation. The gift is activated toward others before it is fully released toward the one who carries it. What is breaking open in this season is the turning of that same gift in your own direction. You are the cycle breaker. Something ends with you. A pattern that has been moving through your history, through your lineage, through your own repeated experience, does not continue forward from you in the same form. This is not about willpower or performance or achieving some perfect version of yourself before the pattern can stop. It is about the fact that you carry a specific frequency that alters the trajectory of everything it comes into sustained contact with. And that frequency is not something you have to build from scratch. It is something you have been suppressing without knowing it, and something this season is releasing. You are standing at the threshold, the one this month has been about all along, the one whose hands are being prepared right now, in this moment, to hold what God has been holding in trust. In your mind, I want you to picture your hands. Open them, both of them, palms facing upward, not in a posture of pleading or begging, in the posture of someone who is present and expectant, and already knows at a level beneath reasoning that what they have been waiting for is genuinely on its way. Picture the space just above those open hands, empty, but not empty the way a room feels before furniture arrives, empty the way a field is empty before spring, already seeded, already prepared beneath the surface, already containing within it the full potential of something about to rise and become visible. That space above your open hands is real. What is coming to fill it is real. And the single act of opening your hands, even in imagination, even for 30 seconds, shifts something in you at a level that words alone cannot reach. Something in the body responds to the gesture before the mind has time to add its commentary. Notice what is sitting in your chest right now. That is not a manufactured feeling. That is you touching something that has been waiting for your attention to arrive. Type "I am ready" in the comments, with the full weight of what those 3 words actually mean, not as performance, not as the correct spiritual response to this moment, as a true declaration made in the direction of something that is genuinely prepared for you. Father, we pause here, not because the words have finished, but because some things require more than words to fully land. There is someone hearing this right now who has been carrying a weight that has no name they have been willing to give it in public, who has been faithful in a season that asked everything of them and seemed to return very little in visible ways, who has held on not because they had clear answers, but because walking away from the knowing felt like betraying something sacred in themselves. See that person. You already do. Before these words were spoken and before this moment existed, you already saw. Every night, they chose faith over the mathematics of their current situation. You held every one of those moments. Not one of them was lost or unregistered or dismissed as too small to matter. I invite you now to release something, whatever you picked up in this season that was never yours to carry permanently. Release the need to have understood the timeline before trusting it. Release the version of the story where you were the reason things took as long as they did. Release the agreements you made, silently and without witnesses, that your ceiling was lower than what you were being called toward. Release the comparisons that made the arrival of someone else feel like evidence of your delay. Release the fear that something has already passed you by and that the window has already moved on without you. Let what has been heavy become light in this moment, not because the weight was not real, it was real, but because you have carried it far enough. The road ahead does not require you to bring all of it with you, and what is waiting at the destination will not fit in hands that are still full of what was never meant to be kept forever. You are the chosen one, and you are ready to receive. You are not behind. You are not overlooked. You are not a second draft of what was originally intended. You are the original intention. You are the first thought. You carry an assignment that was written before the foundations of anything visible you can currently see, in language older than the doubt that has been trying to convince you that you misunderstood your own calling. You are the cycle breaker, and the pattern ends here. You are the voice that opens what has been sealed. You are the light in the room that does not have to announce itself to change what is already present in the atmosphere. What God has prepared for you in this month, in this season, in this very turning of days, is not a consolation prize or a delayed lesser version of what was promised. It is the full thing, and you were built precisely to hold it. I am ready to receive all that has been prepared for this season of my life. I will not deflect it. I will not redirect it onto someone else out of a belief that they need it more than I do. I will not hand it back out of a conviction that I am not yet worthy. I open my hands, I receive, and it is so. And so it is. Let that settle into you now, not as something you performed, but as something that was sealed in a room you cannot fully see, by a Father who has not looked away from your name through any of this. Amen. One more thing before you leave this space. You are not the same person who arrived here when this message began. Something shifted in the listening, not because these words are special above all other words, but because you chose to be present for all of them. And presence is always where the real work happens, not the performance of faith, but the actual showing up for it. Let your like be your amen on this message, not for any count that benefits a channel, as your personal agreement with what was spoken over your life in this moment. Stay connected for what comes in the seasons ahead. This space exists for those who understand that some revelations arrive in sequence. That one truth prepares the ground for the next one to root in. Subscribe so that the next word prepared for your particular season can reach you when the timing is right. For those who felt called to what I shared about Dr. Barone and the Genius Switch, the link is in the description and the pinned comment. Only if your spirit confirms it is part of the provision for where you are right now. Only if something in you recognized it as relevant to what this season is asking. There is someone in your life right now who is in the exact season you were in when this message found you. Someone who has been waiting and wondering and doing the faithful, invisible work that the people around them cannot see. Someone whose hands have been open for a long time without anything landing in them yet. They need to hear this before this month closes too. Send it to them. Let your reaching toward them be the answer to a prayer they did not know how to finish asking. Father, for every person leaving this moment carrying something they did not have when they arrived, let what was planted today be watered by every experience they walk into from here forward. Let the receiving not stop at the edge of this moment, but continue forward into everything they are being sent toward. They came because something led them. Let them leave because something sends them. And so it is. Amen.